Chapter 2, The Tower Room. Well, what about the twisted candles? Nancy laughed. I'm sure you won't lose your position if you lie down a minute to recover from your fright. Let me deliver the tray for you. The trembling girl relaxed again. But I don't know who you are, she cried, except that you are very kind and considerate. We were just overtaken by the storm and our car stalled in your driveway, Nancy said. You don't have to worry about us at all. We really are not very hungry. Outside, the rain began again in a steady downpour, but the thunder had retreated over the hills, so it was evident that the worst of the storm had passed. Nancy, however, had forgotten about the storm. Her unfailing instinct had told her that she was on the threshold of a mystery. My name is Nancy Drew, she told the girl. I am Sadie Whipple, the girl replied. I won't lose my position here, because my foster parents run the tea room, but I can't sit here talking either. I must get to work, or else what? Nancy demanded. In the excitement, no one will miss you for a few minutes. Go upstairs with your tray. I'd like to, but I don't dare, Sadie said, her eyes widening with fear. I was forbidden. Oh, let's have our tea, George interrupted. Is there a mechanic on your staff who can fix our car, Sadie? I can repair it myself, Nancy said hastily. We shall have to wait until the rain stops, though, no matter who does it. What about this tray load of food? It's not improving by standing here. Let us eat it, Bess suggested hopefully. Good food was Bess's greatest delight, just as her increasing plumpness was her greatest worry. No, we shan't, Bess, Nancy laughed reprovingly. There isn't enough to go around anyhow. For whom was this tray intended, Sadie? For Mr. Sidney. He really owns this property, but he lives all alone up in the tower room. He is 100 years old today, so I fixed a little spread for him, the girl replied. Sadie was so pitifully thin, Nancy could not help but think that the food would do her more good than it would the man who inhabited the tower room. I should like to see a man 100 years old, she said aloud. And I certainly think he deserves a little party on his birthday. Mr. Semmet thinks it is too expensive a trayful, Sadie said. You see, Mr. Sidney lets my foster parents have this property in exchange for boarding him and doing his laundry work and so on. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, Miss Drew. Listen to me, Nancy said firmly. I'll pay for the food on the tray, and I'll carry it up and serve it myself. That ought to suit Mr. What's-his-name. I mean your foster father. Oh, would you do that? Sadie cried, her eyes dancing. And what is more, I shall tell Mr. Sidney the spread is your idea. Nancy smiled. From somewhere below stairs, a voice thundered out. Sadie, where are you? Oh, I must go, the girl cried, and darted from the room in great haste. Nancy, you dear old thing, George protested affectionately, putting an arm around her chum's shoulder. You are always putting yourself out to do a kindness for somebody or other who simply doesn't count in your life at all. It's more fun than watching the rain and waiting for toast, Nancy replied. And I believe this timid girl is much too refined to belong to such a common person. I should like to help her. You girls go on downstairs and I'll meet you there. I must see this centenarian. Maybe he is a wizard in an enchanted tower and will cast a spell over you, Bess laughed. Bess and George went down the stairs in high spirits, while Nancy climbed in the opposite direction, eager for whatever adventure might lie in the tower room. The stairway was unlighted, and the now distant lightning made queer shadow play on the walls as Nancy slowly mounted the treads, taking care that nothing on the tray should spill. Except for the growl of far-off thunder and the drumming of the rain, there was no sound audible to her from the vast old house. A perfect setting for a delightful mystery, Nancy thought. The biggest problem right now, though, is how I'm going to knock on the door with both hands balancing a tray. She had reached the top of the stairway and stood in front of a heavy paneled door. A dim light showed beneath it, but no sound came from the other side. A blank door, but no blanker than the mystery which Nancy, all unknowing, was about to confront. As she stood there, some recollection of the seemingly meaningless incidents which had marked the beginning of other adventures flashed through Nancy's mind. A letter from England, for instance, addressed to Miss Nancy S. Drew, had proved to be for another young lady, informing her that she was an heiress. Nancy's mysterious letter not only led her into a long chase for another Nancy, but, as the volume by that title relates, before the other Miss Drew was found, Nancy exposed a crook for whom the United States Secret Service had searched in vain. Just before that, a trip to the country and a halt at a wayside service station had involved Nancy in The Secret of Redgate Farm, which she solved at the peril of her life. No doubt all of us have scores of times rubbed elbows with some refugee from justice, or have figured in some unimportant incident which actually was one link in a long chain of mystery and adventure. Few of us, though, have trained our powers of observation and deduction as Nancy had, although by studying her methods it should not be at all impossible for any intelligent reader to learn them. Of course, Nancy had an advantage in being so conversant with the professional secrets of Carson Drew, the celebrated criminal lawyer, whose cleverness had just as often saved an innocent person from suffering the penalty of another's crime as it had brought wily lawbreakers to justice. Nancy's mother had died years before this. Thus, the natural intimacy between father and daughter had deepened wonderfully. Carson Drew's profession had made him well-to-do, although by no means wealthy, so Nancy had her own car, and in this and in other conveyances she had traveled a great deal. In fact, it was in the West that she had uncovered the secret at Shadow Ranch. Ever since Nancy, unaided, solved the secret of the old clock, which we all recall as the first of her long and growing list of successes, she had worked to educate her faculties. Her reputation was almost as great in River Heights as was her father's, although some of her friends accredited her ability to sheer luck. Perhaps it was luck that had brought Nancy and her chums to the Twisted Candles. Perhaps it was luck that had brought her up to the door of the tower room, where she stood in the flickering glow of distant lightning. "I'll just tap at the door with my foot." Balancing herself against the heavy frame, Nancy tapped at the stout panels with the toe of one dainty, although muddy, slipper. To her surprise, the door swung silently open. Evidently, the latch had not been caught fast. Nancy gazed into one of the strangest-looking chambers she, or anyone else for that matter, had ever seen. The room was a large one, fully 20 feet square, and from all of its walls candles gleamed. Candles by the dozen, all winking in the draught of the open door. It was warm in the room, and the heavy air was pungently scented by burning tallow. Nancy blinked her eyes at the spectacle of the myriad of dancing lights. She entered the room hesitatingly, not certain but that she might trip over a footstool or a black cat, or even a trained owl, for it most certainly seemed to be a wizard's den or an alchemist's laboratory which she had entered. In the great arched window directly in front of Nancy burned the massive, curiously twisted candle whose light had beckoned her to the house. Suddenly, from a low, broad chair before this window, there arose the gaunt figure of a very old man. The candlelight showed to Nancy a picture of Father Time come to life, with his long, silvery white hair sweeping over stooped shoulders and merging with the snowy beard that spread over his chest to his waist. Shaggy white eyebrows half concealed glowing eyes, strangely youthful eyes that peered at Nancy from either side of a jutting, hawk-like nose. "Good evening, Mr. Sidney," Nancy said. "I have brought your dinner. Sadie fixed it up especially for your birthday." To Nancy's surprise, and to her dismay as well, the aged man stretched forth his bony, trembling arms. In a deep, husky voice that faltered as he spoke, he cried out, "Jenny! My Jenny! You have come back to me!" End of chapter 2.